Hi, today's guest is Anat Ishai, and she is somebody who is really exciting to talk to because she has a journey that is so amazing. I would love to share some of it with you, but I don't think I'll be able to share all of it because we only have such a short time every time, a half hour. And how do you get in so much in a half hour? Now, let me first explain where I met Anat. I met Anat online on my social media on Instagram, and she talks very much about challah and her journey with challah. I think what always impresses me is the kneading of the challah dough. So I'm not going to tell you anything about her. I'm going to let her talk about her life and what this is all about, how she got to do this weekly challah baking online. So Anat Ishai, could you just give me a slight introduction into you?
Well, hello there. And first of all, thank you for allowing me to come onto your platform and say hi to your followers. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thanks. I'm so excited about this.
So it's interesting. It seems to be that overnight I became this like Instagram sensation.
It's a
Um,
sensation. Yeah, exactly.
and the reality is that I'm about 20 years in the making, maybe even 25 years in the making. Um, everyone's on a soul mission in this world, but this world is a difficult world to be in. And there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of hard living that we have to do. It's uncomfortable. We deal with a lot of disappointment. My life is not any more unique than anybody else's. I think where the platform came into existence for me is really when COVID started. I think COVID changed everyone's world in different ways. I was a mother of 4 young children at the time. One had just had his bar mitzvah, and we were supposed to come to Israel to do that bar mitzvah trip at the Kotel and tour around the country. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And there was a series of disappointment after disappointment. We're from Toronto. My husband and I are Israeli born, but we've been living in Canada most of our lives. So really, our winters can get quite cold, and especially our COVID experience was quite long and perhaps a little bit more constraining than other places in the world.
It was very constraining. I know that
Yeah.
I went, I think less than a year ago to Toronto, not to Toronto. I went through Toronto, traveled through Toronto. And on the plane, I was still wearing a mask. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
We've gone from that. So it was a very long COVID in your
Right.
part of the world. Yeah.
I think for me, I had to turn my pain into some sort of purpose. Um, I did not, and I share this with my audience, I did not grow up in an observant home. I grew up in the home of Russian Israeli immigrants. And we were the typical story of my parents are Russian refugees that came to Israel in the 70s. Separately, they came through Vienna, where there was the Red Cross camp where they could choose Canada, US, or Israel. Parents chose Israel separately. And as Hashem would have it, they would meet eventually after serving in the army. They married, had my brother and I. And after the first Intifada in Israel, they immigrated to Canada. And that's not a unique story. That's a story that exists amongst a lot of Soviet Jewry and especially the Russian Israeli community. I lived, thank God, a very good childhood. I'm a very a privileged person. My parents instilled within me a lot of important values and a lot of Jewish values. What they couldn't give me in terms of the religious education, they gave me in terms of the cultural and traditional education. I had a very strong Jewish identity. I knew who I was. I knew what my commitments were to myself, meaning I was going to seek higher education and I was going to marry Jewish. Those were 2 absolute truths in my life. And thank God, yeah.
I want to just interject there because I think that it's very important to say this. A lot of the immigrants who came from Russia and from those type of countries came with a very strong identity to Judaism, more than we even understand. And I think that's very important to say that because the way you're saying that, you had this strong identity, I can't see that because that is so important to Russian Jewry. I think it's amazing that they keep that faith so strong. So,
Yeah. And I don't know that it's so much of the faith. I want to say that, and for every family, they may have a different experience, but certainly in my family, and I think it may be the truth for many that came from Moldova, specifically where my parents are from. When you grew up as a Jewish person in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, you were told you were a Jew. They would they would say your name at attendance, and then they would say Jew after your name.
Wow.
So you knew you were a Jew because other people pointed it out. Your identity was given to you, maybe not within the family unit, but by an external force. Now, Soviet Jews paid a very high price to be Jewish. So when they came to Israel, trying to escape that persecution, trying to escape that discrimination, they were also discriminated against for being Russians now. And so they never really left. The story of Soviet Jewry is that it was very hard to leave the discrimination. It was very hard just to be accepted as a Jew because of what Jewry meant. And the lack of education was replaced by a strong Jewish identity and what it meant, because maybe there was hope for a better Jewish future for their children. By the time we came to Canada, thank God, we didn't suffer the discrimination. We assimilated into Canadian society, but not so assimilated that we forgot who we were. Thank God my brother and I are both married to Jewish people, and we live Jewish lives. On a observance level, it looks different. So that's where COVID, the backdrop.
That's your backstory.
That's the backstory. But what happened during COVID, and even before COVID, is that I mentioned to you I grew up in a secular home, but when I came to Israel with NCSY, which is a Jewish youth organization, before Birthright was a thing. And on that trip, it was the first time I'd been back to Israel since we immigrated out. And I came here on this trip and had the most incredible experience, as any 14, 15-year-old would have in Israel. Come on, it's Israel. You're like climbing a mountain, going to the ocean. Now you're in the desert. Now you're like in a mountain again. It's like nonstop fun adrenaline. And on that trip, I was very, very fortunate, as Hashem would plan it out for me, that I met my husband. Now, he was a little bit older than me, but whatever. The story is such that we got married. It worked out. It's okay. We have 4 children, and Baruch Hashem, it's fine. But he was someone very different from me. He was someone that also had immigrated to Canada at a young age, but he, on his own, started to keep Shabbat and started to keep kosher. And he was also Sephardi. So for my family, it's like he's kosher, he's Sephardi, and he keeps Shabbat. It's like 3 strikes are out. What are you doing? Taking a knife into my heart and twisting it?
Yeah.
Anyways, thank God he's very charismatic and a really good person, and it worked out. But he was my North Star, because in my teen years, where I was more impressionable and I was seeking truth and identity and who am I, and challenging what society and maybe my parents wanted for me, I couldn't. My soul was ready to grow. I felt an awakening, but in my home, in my Russian Israeli home, that was not allowed. It wasn't permissible. It was a difficult thing for my parents to go through, because I believe it felt like a rejection for them. I learned very early on, because I'm a sensitive person and I read people, that I was going, before I even had the vocabulary to understand, I was going to keep Shalom Bayit in my home with my parents. And I was going to take this part of myself and I was going to bury it 6 feet under and cover it, so that I can maintain a relationship with my parents, which was the first relationships in my life.
I understand that completely.
But my husband was my North Star. He was my boyfriend at the time, but he was my North Star. And when we got married, we crawled like turtles. And what does that mean? We had a kosher wedding. We had an Orthodox union. We started our home with kosher style kitchen, not everything to the level of kashrut we were now. We started to observe Shabbat in the way that I would light my Friday night candles every Friday night. Holidays became important, more important than the Hallmark, holidays.
Yeah.
But we were still doing the Valentine's Day thing and the Halloween thing, and And then came around after 3 children. Then my husband said to me, Anat, I want to start going to shul with the boys. I said, that's great. Go to shul, make schnitzel rice when you come back. No problem. Take them. And he kept saying to me, no, I'd like to as a family. I said, no, I'll take the boys. Okay, I'll make schnitzel rice when you come back. It's all good. And then I understood he wanted to create more tradition in the home, that Shabbat started to feel for him like not the Shabbat he used to remember. And I went with him to shul, and I went with him into this beautiful community in Toronto called the Thornhill Woods Shul. And it was in that very special incubator of a community that I was allowed to dig out that part of my soul that I buried, where I already understood that there's vocabulary for words, for feelings, for an intuition that was growing inside of me. And it was through those years of quietly in privacy, in the comfort of a community that held us, that we were able to grow and ask questions and do things very organically, slowly. So in comes Chalamam about 2 years ago. And really,
were you making challah all this time?
So I wasn't making challah when I first got married. I was buying challah. I made, maybe I made it once in a while, the challah bake, but I wasn't making it. The real, awakening of challah for me was when COVID hit and I was at home with these 4 kids and everyone was making sourdough because there was a yeast shortage in the world. And I was like, I'm going to make sourdough. And then I was like, I'm failing at sourdough. First of all, it takes like 8 or 10 days to ferment. It's dying and rising and dying, and you have to wait.
You have to talk to it.
I have to talk to it. I have to sing to it. I have to do lots of things for it. And it felt like a 5th child. And I had a dog at the time. And I was like, this is too much. I said, you know what? I found some yeast. Baruch Hashem, I found yeast. I'm like, I'm going to make challah. I know how to make challah. So I made challah, and it wasn't perfect. And it was fine, didn't have to be perfect. It just, challah became this way of marking the day that this is Shabbat. So Tuesday didn't feel like a Monday, and a Monday didn't feel like a Sunday, and a Wednesday didn't feel like a Saturday, but this was Shabbat. So I was going to make something to mark it. And then I started to become proud of what I was making. And I was like, you know what? I'm proud of it. I'm going to dance with it. I'm going to show some simcha because I was down. I wasn't feeling my best and illuminated and joyful, but I needed to get out of that. So I decided to do it and show it. And from there, as I said, challah is the gateway into my platform, because when you're taking something from nothing, when you're making something from nothing, it's very empowering. When you're taking something physical and elevating to spiritual, that's a Jewish idea. And we have a mission in this world to be a light amongst the nation. I just want to bring more light into my home. I wanted to spread more light into the world in a very dark time. And so I decided, you know what, how much gluten and carbohydrates can a person eat? They can eat a lot, by the way. So I decided I'm going to talk about more things. I'm going to introduce Jewish holidays. I'm going to introduce Jewish wisdom, but in a very sensitive way. Jewish people around the world, over 90% of us are not connected. And we all have our reasons. And when we dig down deep, we have to ask ourselves the question, what happened? Where did it?
Why are we disconnecting?
Why are we disconnected? And how have we been responsible for our own disconnections with our brothers and sisters? I do not have rabbinical authority. I do not dictate how someone should be living. I just want to share my light, and I want to share my insights, and I want to share my wisdom, and I want to share my inclusivity, because I really believe in unity without uniformity. I have 4 children that look nothing like me or my husband. Maybe one looks a little bit like me, but they all look like they could come from other parents, but we love them. We love them, and they're very different personalities. And I think to myself, what a compliment to Hashem if we didn't talk to him personally, but we were all on a WhatsApp chat, all the Jewish people, and we were talking to each other. I think Hashem would respond to that favorably.
I think what you're saying actually aligns so much with our magazine, with the Uplift Jewish Women's Magazine, because that's what we're all about. What we do is we reach out to women, and we try to do it for a middle-age group, a normal, a middle-age group, I would call it. People who are in between older parents, younger kids getting married. But we try to be inclusive of everybody. Everybody, we don't have this Frömmkeit, that Yiddishkeit, this, this hat, that shaitel. We're just open to everybody. But I would love to go into something else with you. When you do the challah, though, I know that you keep different things in your head. And would you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's something very powerful about prayer. I learned from a mentor of mine that even when you don't have even when you don't know who you're praying to, there's a certain idea that someone is listening. Someone really is listening. Prayer doesn't mean the answer is yes, but
100%.
prayer gives you a way to connect to the listener. And we call the listener different names. I know the power of a prayer for healing. Thank God we have experienced miracles from it. And I know the power of yearning for something and leaning into a pain or a discomfort, a dark place, and owning it, because this world is a difficult place. It is not always joyous. When I make challah, I have in mind sometimes people that are really suffering, that their Shabbat won't be as joyous as mine. And they will still be keeping that Shabbat. It could be families that experienced terrorism more recently in Israel. It could be people that I've met that are yearning for a child. It could be people that I know that need a refuah shlima. They're going through unimaginable sorrows. And in my little corner of the world, and my little sliver of tikkun, maybe I have the power to help. And that's how I feel about my challah. I know they're not eating it. I know that they're not tasting it, they're not smelling it. But in the merit of making something physical and elevating it to the spiritual and using this incredible tool, it can be a weapon, but this tool of social media, I do believe it makes a difference. Because if I can penetrate somebody's soul, because Jews are like magnets and we really are just one. If I can speak to somebody in a different part of the world, and I know that because they reach out to me, places from Jews from Bosnia, Jews in India, Jews in Brazil, Jews in Toronto, Jews inside of Israel, Jews in very remote parts of the world reach out to me. And I'm the one thread to the Jewish people. I consider that an immense responsibility. I consider it an immense privilege. And so if challah is the gateway into my platform, there is nothing more, I'd say there's nothing more unintimidating than breaking bread with somebody. Because in breaking bread, we can maybe make peace.
That's
Yeah.
that's so true about breaking bread. That I know that. I mean, we say that breaking bread. It's not always used in this context, but it is a beautiful way of saying it. When we eat together, and when we sit down together, and we have a meal together, it takes away so much of our gedarim, our boundaries that we hold together. And I think that that's really very, very good. Okay, and I wanted to ask you something else. You, when you make the challah, do you have someone that you? I know you make it for your family, but do you also make it a lot of it extra, or do you just make for your family and that's it?
Yeah, so back in Toronto, I used to make for my parents, my grandparents. I made for the friends and family that would host us. In Israel, I have been making larger batches, and when we get hosted, I think word has gotten around where I live.
Host.
Yeah, that like challah mom is coming and she's bringing her challah. And also when we have guests. So yeah, I do make enough to suffice to make chavishat challah. But also when I don't, it no prayer is ever wasted, even if it's just the amount that I need for my family.
100%, 100%. It's unbelievable. I just think that this whole way of that it's built into such a community. I mean, you've got a lot of followers. I mean, I think we should say that. How many? Do you know how many now?
I do.
Okay, you could say it. You'll be proud of you. No,
I
you
think
have,
yeah,
you have
it's north of 100,000 at this
yeah,
point.
and that's amazing that you were able
Yeah.
to, and it's all real followers. It's not this, let's click on this one's page and he'll give me a lot of followers. That's not the way it works. You really have followers that really do follow you and listen to you and respond to what you're doing. So you're having such a, they're learning something from you, obviously, because they're returning. I remember one time I saw you doing one, and I was really impressed how you were making, kneading the challah and saying different prayers with, and I thought that was actually really beautiful because when I make challah, I also started making challah in COVID. I never made it before. Actually, it was right after my mother died, COVID started, and this whole project is in my mom's name. And when I started, my mother always made the challah. I never made challah. It wasn't something I enjoyed, and it never came out good. But I think she must have passed it down when she died, because when I started making it in COVID, all of a sudden it worked. And the whole, I don't make this whole performance, but it is such a beautiful thing to do that, because I think it makes that whole challah so much more important to your life, to your kids' life, to the people around you. And I think that's
Yeah.
just an amazing thing that you've done that. It's really beautiful.
I think, first of all, thank you. I think it's important for us to share our inner thoughts. We keep a lot of things, there's a time and place, I would say, to keep things hidden. And there's beauty in hidden things. And we, in our Jewish tradition, we know what those things are. But this is a time where we cannot play small, where we cannot diminish our light. And as I have gone older, as I have gone through things and I have moved through things, I'm not scared of my dark feelings, of my dark thoughts, of my heaviness. I know that those are integral parts of me and they move with me, that I don't need to be in a constant state of happiness. Happiness is not the goal. The goal and the purpose of my life, it's and really what Judaism teaches us is that the goal is to live a purpose-driven life, to have meaning in what you do. Not everything and not every day is a good day. Every day is a good day to be alive, to learn something, to grow from it, but not every experience is happy. There are heavy moments in life. I stopped asking Hashem, why are you doing this to me? I realized that's not a Jewish question. We're not, there's no reward in asking why, but the reward is to ask
something on that.
yeah, the reward is to ask, like, what am I to learn from this?
What am I? Yeah. I have one thing I would love to add to that, because I think it's so important about the whys, the where. We expect Hashem to give us every day this perfect day. We wake up, the sun shines, and but the truth is, every day is a perfect day. It's just that we don't realize Hashem's plan for us. And yes, we go through lots of problems and I could tell you stories and stories and stories. Life was not always easy for anybody. And every single step that I've taken in life, I always say, look where eventually I'll turn around and think, oh my gosh, that's why that happened. I can understand it now. And I think that is so important to emphasize, that God didn't say that your life is going to be perfect and everything's going to, it's just going to be perfect for you, what I have in store for you. And you'll one day find out what that is. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard pill to swallow,
Yes.
especially my generation was not raised with the notion that life is hard and difficult. Our parents wanted to shelter us from the hard and difficult life that they went through. They wanted to provide more comfort, more ease. I do teach my children that life isn't comfortable and life can be hard, but life is very meaningful and you must always find purpose in what you're doing. I find even on the days where I'm not feeling so creative, or I'm not feeling myself, I say this, I've written for the Times of Israel, and there's a piece in one of my articles where I say, I only make challah when I'm in a place of gratitude. If I have anxiety, if I'm feeling depressed, if I'm angry, I go to the bakery and I buy the challah. Challah cannot fully rise to what it's meant to be and reach its spiritual height if you don't infuse gratitude into it. I really make it a point to enter into Shabbat and enter into the process of making challah from a calm place. Maybe it takes me 5 minutes just to breathe and meditate. Maybe I need a coffee. Maybe I need a good cry. Maybe I need to scream. Hopefully not at somebody, but that's real. And I think the more that we can lean into the multi-dimension that we are multi-dimensional people, and Judaism is diverse and Judaism is multifaceted. I don't believe God has a problem with diversity. I think we do. So my challah process may look different than somebody else's. It's a different recipe. It's a different braid. It's a different, put in the wet ingredients before the, whatever. It doesn't actually matter. More recently, I posted that making challah is not about the showstopper masterpiece at the end. It's actually just about progress. Perfection is not something that we should drive. Yeah. My challah looks different every week. Maybe it's the humidity. Maybe I got distracted and it overproofed. Maybe I let it burn too much. My challahs don't look perfect. I never want to be part of a branding or a presentation of perfection. It's misleading. It's dangerous. I don't even like it for me. It's an unattainable standard. My challahs sometimes do not look good. They always taste good, but they do not always look good. I do not always look my best. It doesn't mean I'm not the best me of that day.
I wanted to say your tickles. You always the way you wrap your hair, and you've made it so beautiful. And I think that's also a very big part of you, that you cover your hair so well and you show it so nicely. I just must tell you that it really does make an impression on me personally. So I'm sure, I don't know if it's intentional, but you do, it's beautiful. And I think that's very important to people to see, that we cover our hair, yeah, but we could look beautiful, and that's what we are. I mean, we're Jewish women and we should look good, 100%. Yeah. Anyway, we're coming to the end of this, and I would have loved to talk for a very, very long time, because I see you have so much to say. So maybe another time we'll come and we'll talk about something else. But Anat, it's been a pleasure meeting you. And I don't know if you ever, if you have a special recipe or a special tip that you could share with everybody to make a good challah.
Yes.
That would be great. And then we can all sign off. So do you have a tip for everybody?
Well, first of all, if you've never made challah and you need a good recipe, please head over to my Instagram page, and the recipe is there for free in my bio. The second thing is actually a tip I learned from another content creator called the Challah Prince, who makes really majestic, beautiful challahs. I think there's a collaboration in the future with us. Okay. And he actually gave me a wonderful tip, which is buy a painter's brush from the hardware store. That's what you should use to egg wash your challah, so you can get into those corners and the crevices. So when the challah expands, you still get into those nooks and crannies.
So you don't have that crack. That's very
exactly good. So that's a technical tip. But the tip that I really want to share is never ever approach challah unless you're in a place of gratitude. It will not rise. It will not work, because you are not operating at your best.
That's beautiful. It really, really is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it was so nice to meet you. And I can't wait to see everybody again next week, when we have another start the week with the Uplift. And Anat, again, thanks and goodbye.
Thank you. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.